Hello and welcome to the Alpha Movement Podcast. My name is Tom Foxley, and on today's show I am joined by the one, the only Dr. Kirk Parsley. Obviously, this episode is all about sleep because there was so much that we didn't get into in the first episode that we needed a part 2 for, and I would love to do a part 3, 4, 5, 6 and just generally speak to this man more. Such is his knowledge. It is awesome, and I'm actually amazed at how good this podcast episode is. Not obviously because of Kirk's ability to speak and his knowledge, but because of the fact that I, previous to recording, had like literally 10 minutes before, I had just finished 50 calories on the assault bike and I had been chucking my guts up, so I wasn't in a good state to perform. Let's just say I could still taste sick in my mouth and I was shaking as I recorded the show. So it was an interesting show for me, but there was such amazing knowledge throughout the episode. It is a real good one to listen to. In fact, I think it's one of my favourite that I've recorded so far. But before we get into the show, I want to reassert in your mind the idea of the Alpha Movement Academy. Now, for those of you who didn't get a quick description of the Academy last time, it is essentially a group, a tribe, a band of brothers who are joined together, all trying to become a better man, whether that's in lifestyle, in fitness, in health, and just generally a bit better. We are starting with the physical body because that is my belief that if you master the physical body, you can master your life, and that is what we're doing to begin with. We're addressing some less than obvious ideas and things that people leave out when they're typically trying to readdress their body. So each month is a different topic. This month is mobility, and we're going to be really crushing some stuff out. We've got nutrition. Like, not only do you get all the training from myself, but you get access and you get access to some of the world's leading experts. So each one of these podcasts, it is live streamed within the academy, so you can ask questions live to these guys, meaning that not only do you get my knowledge, you get the knowledge of these world-class experts and leading authorities. So yeah, you can get any question answered. You get monthly training, which means like everything you need. Essentially, we're building the ultimate version of you 1 month at a time, piece by piece, like a brilliant jigsaw. If you want to find out more about the Academy or make the most of the huge early bird offer, you can head over to alphamovement.co/academy and find out all the information you need to know right there. Now, let's get on with the show with Dr. Kirk Parsley. So, hey Kirk, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Tom?
I'm very, very well. So last time we spoke, we won't go through your intro again because people can just listen to the last episode we did. I can't remember which episode. I think it was about episode 14 or 15. But we left on how much sleep people actually need, and this is obviously a very controversial topic in some areas. Some people think less, some people think more, and some people think a polyphasic approach is the way to go. But how do we start thinking about it when people, like, in terms of a round number?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the people that have the most valid answer on this, in my opinion, is are the sleep researchers. And the sleep research, sleep research itself has only been going on about 50 years. I mean, sleep medicine is a relatively young scientific field, but they've sort of done this. The first trial was something called a bunker trial, when they're really going to try to figure out how much sleep people needed, and it's been recreated over, I don't know, dozens of times, if not hundreds of times. Different sleep researchers, different countries, under different environments have all kind of done similar things to answer that question, like how much sleep do we actually need? And then I think it's verified by how much people sleep currently. People who still live a hunter-gatherer lifestyle or live with very little or no electricity, they match what the sleep research has borne out. So what the bunker trials did is they took a group of people and they put them in a completely completely dark room, a bunker, a completely dark room that had nothing in it except a toilet and a bed. And they put them in there for 14 hours a day, and they could do whatever they wanted to for, those 14 hours, but, they just encouraged them to sleep as much as they felt like they needed to. But, there was no lights to turn on or anything like that. So, they were just going to be in the dark for 14 hours a day. And then they let them out 10 hours and then they put them back in. And what the research showed was that, the average person, when they started that trial, slept about 12 and a half hours a day. And we think that's because, the sleep research community believes that that's because they were paying back sleep debt. And sleep debt, it's a lot like credit card debt. Every night you don't get enough sleep, you have to pay that back to some extent. And exactly how long that takes and exactly how much sleep debt you build up with how much loss is still the nebulous area. And I won't pretend to have the answer to that, but what happens is they do this for a month. The average person sleeps about 12 and a half hours a day and then progressively sleeps less and less and less and less, and then averages out around 7.5 to 8 hours per night. And these are adults. And after that, you can put them in a dark room for 14 hours a day, and they'll sleep 7.5, 8.5 hours, which means that they're going to lay completely awake for 5.5 to 6 hours in a totally dark room with nothing to do. So, if one can do that, then one would have to assume, okay, you've slept all you're going to sleep if you can lay around that long and not go back to sleep. And it really hasn't varied. I mean, there haven't been any outliers, and I know they're business moguls and famous people who claim to sleep 4 hours a night or 5 hours a night, but we've just never seen that in any clinical research. Like we've never seen that. So 7.5 to 8 hours is really the answer for adults.
Okay, because something that obviously that you hear quite a lot is the idea of Tim Ferriss, I think, called it the Uberman principle, which is polyphasic sleep essentially. So for guys that are listening, that's breaking your sleep up into one or more cycles. And his theory was, or the theory that he kind of jumped on for this, was the idea that the time spent in REM, or rapid eye movement sleep, was equated to wakefulness or alertness and restfulness, I think. So his theory was that if you had more or shorter sleep cycles, you'd get into REM, spend more time in REM, and therefore would need less time total sleep. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, there is some validity to the idea of polyphasic sleep. And polyphasic sleep has been done successfully for across many different industries. One, of course, is my background, the SEALs. I mean, as you can imagine, SEALs very often do something really close to polyphasic sleep when you're on a long sort of mission, or even a long training mission, and preparing for missions. And there's anytime you sort of get tasked with the mission, there's a lot of planning that goes on, and there's a ton of people involved, and there's a lot of work to be done before you can even leave. And then, of course, you're going to leave at night, and you're going to take a vehicle or helicopter or something somewhere, and then you're going to have a long walk, and then a long end, what we call infill, and then you may lay up for a couple of hours. So I mean, the idea of getting sleep here and there it isn't exactly what Tim was talking about. Tim was sort of talking about scheduling it and planning it. And what the valid part of that is that if you can get adequate REM sleep, you can maintain cognitive functioning a lot better. So as an example, when I was just talking about the bunker trials, once those people got to a level of consistent sleep when they were sleeping. For math, easy math, we'll just say 8 hours. Once they got to where they were sleeping 8 hours every night for like 10 days in a row, then we said, okay, you're completely sleep adapted, and that's how much sleep you need. And then they would give them some sort of cognitive test. And it could be, anything you can think of. It could be problem solving. It could be, typing skills, typing with your offhand. It doesn't matter. Reaction time, coordination task, puzzle solving, doesn't matter. Give them some sort of cognitive test when they're sleep adapted, when they've caught up on all their sleep and they've been sleeping 8 hours a night for 10 nights or so. And then we call that the baseline. And then we take 2 hours of sleep away from them and let them only sleep 6 hours, and then come in and test them the next day, and they do worse. Their performance is worse. What if you're waking them up early? They are losing more REM sleep probably than deep sleep, because deep sleep dominates the first half of the night, and REM dominates the second half of the sleep, I should say. And so they'll do worse, and they will continue to do worse every single night for months. Like if you track their progress out, after sleeping 6 hours a night for 11 days in a row, you perform exactly as though you haven't slept for 24 hours. That's your performance level, which is like on par with the blood alcohol level of 0.1. So you're a basket case. And then 22 days of that, you perform as though you haven't slept for 48 hours. These people are losing out on REM, and you can say, oh, well, there's the evidence. However, they've also done it with physical testing. So, they've done it with pain threshold, they've done it with strength, they've done it with endurance, they've done it with perceived effort of exercise, and it's the same story. So, doing polyphasic sleep, isn't necessarily going to change the time spent and any certain stage in a predictable manner, because when you sleep depends on what phases of sleep you drop off into, and what that polyphasic sleep period is. Let's say you do a 2-hour sleep block. What happens in that sleep block, whether it's deep sleep or REM sleep, is going to depend upon where your body's at, like where your biological clocks are at, what time you woke up, what time of the day it is now, what you've been doing. All sorts of variables are going to come into play there. So while polyphasic sleep will maintain cognitive functioning, it definitely breaks down the body. So during the deep sleep, let's say you can figure this out to where you could, you probably have to work with somebody. I don't think you could do it with like a wearable device. You'd have to work with with somebody who it's a sleep researcher or something, but you probably could work it out to where all of your sleep blocks were dominated by REM. But what you'd see then is just a huge physical decline, because what happens during deep sleep is that's when you're secreting all of your, that's when you're anabolic. That's when you're repairing. So, that's when your immune system is at its highest. That's when you're secreting growth hormone and testosterone, and, your stress hormones are at their lowest, and you're repairing damage to your body, your tissues, you're flushing out your, toxins in your brain, and all this stuff is happening during this slow wave and deep sleep. So if you're depriving yourself of that, then you're depriving yourself of all those hormones, and all those hormones affect every other hormone, and eventually your cognitive functioning is still going to decline. Something like testosterone is hugely important for cognitive functioning. Insulin is hugely important for cognitive functioning, and insulin and testosterone, but insulin sensitivity decreases by 30% with just single night of poor sleep or insufficient sleep, and testosterone decreases by about 30% as well, and growth hormone decreases about 30% as well. So it's a way, I guess, a short answer to, after I've rambled for a long time, to if I wanted to answer that in like a succinct way, I would say that polyphasic sleep can help you get through periods of just extreme workload where you just simply if you have to sleep deprive yourself, but you can kind of schedule yourself in this polyphasic manner to get as much sleep as you possibly can, but you're not going to be able to just like lay down and do a nighttime sleep, then you can get through a period of that. And it's better than nothing. And it's way better than just, gutting through it and just saying, I'm just going to, crank through and work for 30 hours straight and then, go to sleep. It would be much better to, take, over that 30 hours to take, 4 or 5 2-hour sleep periods or 90-minute sleep periods or something like that.
Yeah. I'd kind of concur with the idea, just from personal experience, like an N=1 kind of experiment type thing. It's fine for short term, but you miss one cycle and it destroys you, just as a broken man.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about it, I mean, like people who like single-handed a sailboat across the Atlantic or even circumnavigate or whatever. And those people are obviously doing some form of polyphasic sleep for quite an extended period, and their brains are working well enough to allow them to, continue navigating and get home, unscathed or at least alive. So, I mean, I would use it as a tool for when you have to, but it's definitely not more effective than sleeping the way you were designed and evolved to sleep.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And something we didn't quite touch on last time. We kind of got near it and skirted around the edge of it, but I didn't actually ask. What's the current thoughts on exact bedtimes and in relation to hormone productions at certain like times in terms of like the where you are on the earth and that kind of stuff, and then how does that affect? Well, I had this guy on recently called Nick Littlehales. He's he worked with quite a few football teams or soccer teams, and he talks about chronotypes quite a lot. What are your thoughts on those kind of things?
Yeah, well, there are definitely chronotypes that we've known of, and we've known about them anecdotally kind of forever. I mean, that's where the term night owls and larks come from. I mean, we know there are people that are completely bubbly and bouncing out of bed. They usually annoy those of us who are owls and need a solid 30 minutes to 1 hour to kind of get cranking in the morning. My wife and I are exactly opposite. She is definitely a lark and bounces out of bed and wants to get going, and I'm like, quit talking to me. Like I don't want any interaction for at least half an hour. Like, let me have a cup of coffee. Let me do some reading. Let me wake up. I mean, that we know those exist. And so that begs the question. Okay, so if I know I'm an owl and it's actually genetic, right? So it's actually a genotype. It's it's not something that you learned how to do or because of the way you grew up or whatever. It's like you're genetically kind of predisposed to wanting to feeling more alert a little later on in the day. However, it doesn't vary nearly as much as we think of. So there's the classic examples of like people who are really into gaming or really get caught up into television or something, and they don't go to sleep till 2 a.m. or something, or 3 a.m. and that's not normal for anybody. So what we know through through studying physiology and creating laboratory environments like this, but also just studying people who still live like hunter-gatherers, is that about 3.5 hours after the sun goes down, your neurochemistry has changed to a point where your body is going to preferentially be asleep, barring something preventing it from being asleep, like some sort of danger around, or just being stimulated by something being super active, and that the difference between the owls and the larks there is really probably only about an hour. And so, if you wanted to say ideal, ideal is about 3.5 to 4 hours after the sun goes down is when you should ideally be going to sleep. But that is, of course, presupposing that you're actually using the sun as your cue for your circadian rhythm. And of course, we know that light saturation gets in the way of that. Artificial lighting, completely changes that game. But if you are going to, sort of do everything that you can to live this ideal way, and when I work with clients and when I do consulting or anything, I always tell everybody, it's like, there's an ideal and there's a reality. And we can't always live our ideal lifestyle. I mean, there are logistical issues that get in the way of being able to go to bed exactly at that time or whatever. And so, that's when we start using, tricks to mitigate, techniques to mitigate or supplements and things like that to kind of, to try to help it. But essentially, your body is designed to use the sun as its cue, and kind of when that light goes off, when that blue light goes out of your eyes, that's kind of when you're ideally ready to go to sleep. Now, if you keep shining light in your eyes, and your body never senses that, and then instead of say like 7 p.m. and if the sun went down at 7 p.m., you would feel sleepy around 10 if you're using the sun. But let's say you're in a completely artificial environment, you're inside of a building and you have bright lights all around, and you turn off the lights at 10. Well, now you're not going to really feel sleepy till about 1. And what most people confuse is that when we talk about circadian rhythms, we're talking about neurochemistry. We're talking about the neurotransmitters in your brain, how they're changing in a way that would, preferentially have you asleep, preferentially have you in deep sleep, preferentially have you in REM sleep, create this sleep architecture. But we also have ultradian rhythms, which is, fluctuations of hormones during our day and fluctuations of blood pressure and fluctuations of heart rate. And the truth of the matter is that every single cell in your body has a biological clock. And those aren't getting shifted by the circadian rhythm. I mean, they're being marginally adjusted, but they're still kind of doing their thing as if you should be asleep at 10 o'clock. And so you're going to break down if your bedtime is just way later than kind of the 10 o'clock time period. I mean, that's the way it is. And we know that for a fact from shift workers. I mean, we studied shift workers for 50 years. The CDC even recognizes it as a type 2A carcinogen. It's essentially on par with cigarette smoking for causing cancer. We know it decreases lifespan. Shift workers live about 14 years less than, non-shift workers. So, and that's even ones that are still getting 8 hours of sleep, but they're getting it at the wrong time of the day. So, the bedtime does matter, and the ideal is probably, 3 to 4 hours after sundown and waking up around the time the sun comes up, assuming you don't live like on the North Pole or something,
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And then obviously the kind of how that ties into athletic performance, I think, is like certain hormones are produced at certain times into the sleep cycle as well. Is that something that's that starts from the beginning of sleep, or is that again tied to the sunset and sunrise?
Yeah, yes. So like all of the anabolic behavior, the repairing of, as I'm sure most of your audience knows, when you work out, you don't get stronger, right? When you exercise, you actually get weaker. You break your body down. But then when your body repairs, it repairs in a way to be able to handle what you did the day before, should you have to do it again. And then if you keep ramping up that intensity, your body has to kind of keep growing. It has to keep responding and coming back more resilient and more able to handle higher loads of exercise. And that's how you get more fit. all of that anabolic behavior happens during what we call slow wave sleep cycles. So stages 3 and 4, and their brain waves delta and theta. A lot of people just call that deep sleep. So we'll call that deep sleep for ease of conversation. And then REM sleep, we know has a lot more functions with emotions and cognition and memory and things like that. So if you're missing out on the deep sleep, and one of the main culprits of people missing out on deep sleep is alcohol use. So if you use alcohol as kind of a sleep aid to get you, because you're wound up, and so you're going to have a few cocktails before you go to bed, that interferes with deep sleep. That interferes with hormonal production, and literally 95% of all the testosterone that you're going to produce during the day, and testosterone is the dominant sex hormone for both men and women. A lot of people think women are estrogen, but it's not. They have 10 times more testosterone than they do estrogen. And 90 to 95% of all the testosterone you'll produce will be during the first 2 sleep cycles, the first 2 deep sleep cycles that you do during the night. And the same thing with growth hormone, and about probably I would say 80% of all of the physiological repair. So everything kind of, let's just say from the neck down, the repair to any sort of exercised or damaged or slightly tweaked tissues, that's all going to repair during those stages of sleep. So one of the things that tends to happen when people go to sleep really late is they'll very often affect their sleep architecture, and they'll get less deep sleep just because they go to bed really late and they get up, even if they get adequate sleep, and they get up late as well. If they go to bed at 2 a.m. and they don't get out of bed till 10 a.m., they're still getting 8 hours of sleep, but we know through labs, through sleep studies in the laboratory, that they'll get less deep sleep than if they would have gone to bed at 10.
All right. And something I wanted to kind of touch on is how exercise affects sleep, and how, because I've heard a few things, I think it's mostly anecdotal, but the idea that you need to sleep on top of your required sleep, the equivalent time that you exercise for. So if you exercise for an hour, you need an extra hour of sleep. What's the current thoughts on that?
So there's truth to that. I don't think I'm not aware of any formula for saying exactly how much that is, but one of the difficulties with teaching people about sleep or trying to idealize people's sleep is the same thing as trying to idealize somebody's exercise or idealize somebody's nutrition. Not only is it not exactly the same for everybody, but it's not exactly the same for the same person, every day as well. So if you have a particularly, strenuous, training day, or just like a really hard physical day, or even a really hard cognitive day, you might actually need an extra hour and a half of sleep. The only way to know how much sleep you need, unequivocally, is to not use an alarm clock and just be able to wake up whenever you wake up. And again, that would be idealized, and I realize that 95% of the industrialized world just can't do that because they have to be at work and they have to take their kids to school and all sorts of things like that. But definitely, harder, more physical days, more cognitive days, more stressful days require more sleep to repair. What you should really just kind of consider sleep is it's the replenishing and restorative time of your day, and it's really the only time that you're doing that. If you're sitting down at your computer typing, your muscles aren't repairing, your tendons aren't repairing, you're not getting stronger, you aren't recovering from your workout. That's not happening. That's only happening while you're asleep. anything that you learn, anything that you're studying, anything that you're trying to get better at, a physical task, a mental, coordination task, any type of knowledge base you're trying to get better at, all of that stuff is being shifted from your working memory into your long-term memory and becoming a durable track, something that you can do sort of automatically and build upon and connect to other known information. All that's happening during sleep as well. So, if you're taxing, any sort of extra taxing on your body is going to require a little more time to repair it and to idealize it and replenish it and restore it and get you ready to do the same thing the next day.
Something that comes up quite a lot is the idea of self-quantification, and we've had a lot of people on, like Brian McKenzie, for example, and Kelly Starrett, like big proponents of feeling your way through training, feeling your way through recovery. Where does the idea of, or what's your current thoughts on quantification of sleep, and how much just to leave up to nature and your kind of your default setting, as it were?
Yeah. Well, I mean the sleep quantification devices that are out there, and there are some really high-end ones that are, pretty darn close to what you would get if you did a polysomnograph, which is like, an official sort of medical clinical sleep study. Some of them are getting really close to being that accurate. It's my, just sort of philosophical belief that if you don't measure something, you're not going to get better at it. It is a way, I mean, even something as simple as a Fitbit, which just simply uses actigraphy. It's just like how much you move around. If you move around a lot, it'll say you didn't sleep very much. If you don't move around, it'll say you slept more. It's not a super exact kind of metric, but it is a metric, and it's something that allows you to, maintain accountability. I mean, we're all really good at fooling ourselves, and if we just say, "Oh, I think I got plenty of sleep," or it would be the same as like if you went into the gym and you lifted weights, but you never got to know exactly how much was on the bar. Like, somebody else was putting the weights on for you and you didn't really know. And then you would be, if somebody asked you, are you getting stronger? It would be completely subjective, and you're like, well, I think I'm getting stronger, but you wouldn't really know, where you would know if you've been lifting more weight or not. And sleep's the same way. I mean, sleep's even worse because there's not an objective experience of sleep, all right? Or even a subjective experience of sleep. It's like we just we go to sleep. We know, we kind of remember when we went to sleep, and then we wake up, and what happened in between there, we don't really know much about. So, I would say quantifying it is better than not quantifying it, regardless of how accurate the device is. When my clients really like those devices and want to use them, I say, fine, use them. Don't use them as, don't use them as in a super dogmatic way to where it actually creates anxiety around how much you're sleeping, and you're then trying to force yourself to sleep more, or something like that. That gets in the way of stuff. But I think having some sort of metric allows accountability, and of course, the only way we're ever going to be happy and fulfilled with our life is if we're holding ourselves accountable to our own ideals. And if we value sleep and we want to get better at sleep, that's one way of measuring it. Now, if you have the luxury of just sleeping as much as you feel like you need to sleep every day, and you don't need to quantify it because, whatever, like you're an entrepreneur, you're extraordinarily wealthy, and you don't have to work for money, and you can go to sleep when you want to and get up when you want to. Yeah, that's the ideal way to sleep. I mean, that would be perfect, but most people aren't in that world, and so then I would say, try to quantify it and then value it and then try to get better at it. Yeah,
definitely. Do you quantify your sleep?
I don't, because I am an entrepreneur, and I do have the luxury of going to sleep whenever I want to and getting up whenever I want to. But my sleep routine is so baked into my brain, and it's been around. I've been doing the same stuff for so long and going to bed at the same time for so long, and that, I mean, it's just, like I was saying, like if I have a super hard workout one day, I might wake up an hour later or 30 minutes later or something like that. But for the most part, I mean, I go to sleep at pretty much the same time every night and wake up at the same time every morning, and I don't need an alarm clock, and I don't even need a clock to tell me what time it is to know that it's time for me to go to bed. And I'm just kind of so routine with it that I feel it, and it works out for me. But if I do, like when I do a big event, like we were talking earlier, like in the month of May, I did, I don't even remember. I think I did 6 or 7 lectures and 3 symposiums, and the 3 symposiums were literally back to back. So I went from one symposium to the next, and I was essentially like on stage or, talking to audiences or individuals, answering individuals' questions for, 10 to 12 hours per day for, I think it was like 11 days in a row or something like that. And then I still had to travel a ton for lectures, and then I was still running, the supplement business, and I was still working with my clients. And I always, after those 11 days, I came home and I slept for, I think, 16 hours the first night, and then I slept about 12 hours the next night, and it probably took me a solid week to recover from that and get back down to my regular schedule.
Something that is obviously inherent in being busy and inherent in being an entrepreneur as well, and especially if you're traveling a lot, is jet lag and crossing time zones. Have you got any techniques that you particularly adhere to or recommend to people who are flying a lot, crossing time zones, or even just going away for a short period of time, want to adapt to that time zone quickly?
Yeah, so there's really I actually just wrote a blog about that a couple of days ago that I think is getting posted on my site today. Although I try to keep the blogs readable, so I don't go super scientific or go too long on them. But really, what it breaks down to is that we didn't evolve to be able to travel across 10 time zones in one day, right? So our bodies just don't know how to deal with that, because we've only been able to do that for 100 years maybe, or probably even less than that. So it is definitely a problem. The first thing that I tell everybody, though, is that your best defense against that is to make sure that when you're not traveling, that your sleep is absolutely dialed in as well as it possibly can be. Because like anything else, if you're really good at sleep and you're consistently getting really good quality sleep, you're going to be more resilient to a bit of sleep deprivation, which is essentially going to happen when you cross time zones. So there's really only a couple of things that can be done. Let's say, for example, you live on the west coast of the United States. Let's say you live in LA and you're going to New York, and there's 3 hour time difference in between those two. So now, when you get to New York, and let's say you travel late in the day and you get to New York, and 10 o'clock comes around and you should be going to sleep, but your biological clock is saying it's only 7 o'clock. So you're not going to want to go to sleep, which means you're going to probably fall asleep, at 1 a.m. and then you're going to still have to get up at 6 or 7 to do whatever you'd kind of gone out there to do. So that's the problem going west to east. East to west, obviously, different problem. So now you're in New York and, it's 10 o'clock for you and you get to California and it's only, 7 p.m. and it's like you want to go to sleep. So now you've got to kind of keep yourself awake and try to get on track. So, what I tell people to do is first idealize your sleep when you have control of it. When you're not traveling, it'll make you more resilient. Idealize your nutrition because that will make you more resilient as well. And by that, I just really mean eat whole foods. And I don't care what your dogma is. You can be a vegan or you can be ketogenic. I don't care anything, but just eat whole foods. Don't eat processed foods. Make sure you have a good insulin sensitivity is kind of the key to all of the nutritional things in my mind. But in my example of going from LA to New York, what I'd have my client do, or what I'd do myself, is I would start decreasing the amount of light in my eyes earlier in the day. And I would do that through glasses. You can actually take melatonin. So my product has a very small amount of melatonin in it, which, is really just kind of meant to initiate sleep. And if you take too much melatonin on a regular basis, I think it's problematic. But if you wanted to take a milligram of melatonin or something, you would say, okay, I know in New York it's my bedtime right now. So, or my bedtime would be 7 o'clock here. So maybe at 4 o'clock, I'm going to start trying to decrease the light in my eyes and I'm going to take melatonin and then I'm going to try to go to bed. I'm going to try to go to bed a little earlier and, just I would do that for about 3 days before I go there. And then when I get there, I'm still going to be off. It's not going to completely mitigate that, but maybe it cuts the time in half, say, that it takes you to recover. And of course, you would still take your melatonin or your sleep supplement when you got to New York and you're trying to go to bed earlier than your body wanted to go to bed. And then you would do that, for 2 or 3 days after you got there. And that's going to help, what we call advance your circadian rhythm. So it's going to pull your bedtime closer to you. And then when you wake up in the morning, you want to do the opposite. So when you wake up in the morning, you want to really stimulate yourself. So the way you stimulate yourself and the way your body's designed to stimulate itself awake is through light. So, whether you have, there's some gadgets out there. The human charger is one of them. It's kind of a different mechanism. Yeah. It's kind of a different mechanism. It's not exactly the same as putting light in your eyes, but it does penetrate the skull and stimulate certain regions of the brain that promote wakefulness. There's a device called the retimer, which are kind of glasses, they're like the frames of glasses, and they have little lights down at the bottom, and they'll put light in your eyes. There's little devices you can buy that are they're supposed to be high lux lighting, and you put those sort of 30 degrees above your line of sight, and you kind of saturate yourself with light. Do your exercise, early in the morning as opposed to midday or later in the day. And that's going to, help wake you up, and it's going, again, to pull your bedtime closer to you because your body's going to believe it's going to help you shift your circadian rhythm. When you go the opposite direction, the opposite is true. So, one of the things you mentioned earlier, does exercise affect your sleep? Where I thought you were going to go with that is, what time you exercise actually matters. So if I were going from New York to LA, and I know that I'm going to feel sleepy way before it's the right time to go to sleep, I'm going to put my workout at towards the end of the day. And about, if you do a 60-minute workout, a fairly intense 60-minute workout, you will push your bedtime further away from you. Further away, you will feel less sleepy. You'll push it out by about an hour and a half, about 90 minutes, by doing a 60-minute workout. And then you can do the same thing. You can do the bright light therapy there, right? You can do any of those types of things, but you're going to be doing those now in this, like in the later parts of the day. So like 7 p.m., 8 p.m., things like that. You're going to be doing that to kind of keep yourself awake. And then you're going to pull those off, probably not as late as 8, but, maybe, 5, 6, 7 p.m. you're going to do those. And then you're going to pull those off and you're going to allow your body to try to start programming itself to go to sleep. And then you just do sort of a normal sleep routine when you're there. And that's really, I mean, there's lots of kind of fantasy products out there that claim to be able to do things, grounding mats and sleep rocks and crystals and all sorts of other stuff. But I haven't seen any. I haven't seen any valid science behind any of that, and I haven't seen anybody. Some of my clients have tried those more obscure products, and I've never seen any of that work. So, one
of the big ones there is that I hear a lot about is the copper soled shoes for grounding, apparently. But I don't know whether you've seen any science on that.
I have not. I haven't even heard of those.
Okay.
So there are actual shoes that you wear during the day?
Yeah, they've got copper plugs, so apparently you ground to the magnetic resonance of Earth. But I honestly don't know anything about that, so anything I said about it would just be pure guesswork.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Would that require you to be standing on the ground, or they work the same in a building? Or
I should imagine if you're on foundations, it would just screw us all up.
Yeah, one would think if you're in a 50-story building, I don't think it would matter what you had on your feet. But I mean, I don't pretend to know everything. I mean, there could be some other stuff out there, but those are the types of things that I recommend people to do. It's really, you can use melatonin to bring bedtime closer to you. You can use exercise and bright light, essentially, and loud noise and stimulation and music and things like that to kind of push bedtimes away from you. And then you can start trying to get in phase, 3 to 4 days before you go somewhere. You can start, shifting your bedtime either a little, shifting your bedtime earlier or getting up earlier, depending on whichever way you're going. And you can, minimize the effect of that time zone travel, but you can't get rid of it. It's just like, shift work. Everybody, every time I do a lecture to any organization that does shift work, law enforcement or DOD or DOJ or first responders or anything, they all want to know, well, how can I fix this? How can I, how can I make this not true? And I'm like, you can't make this not true. It's just true. 2 + 2. They want me to tell them that 2 + 2 isn't 4, and it just is. And I'm like, here are some mitigating things you can do to kind of help yourself. And then the other thing that I recommend, when you're, when you are, traveling across multiple time zones, you're going to get, you're going to have more lows in your day. You're going to have more energy deficits because you're out of sync. And so I encourage people to nap if that's a possibility. I mean, it obviously depends on what your job is and what you're doing and why you're traveling, but I highly recommend napping until you've at least until you've fully adapted. And there's nothing wrong with napping, even if you do get, perfect sleep every night. A midday nap is kind of wired into us as well. So that can restore some of that cognitive depletion that happens during the day.
Yeah, on the subject of shift work, I can't remember who it was. I think it was a lady talking about it. She was saying about unless you feel like it's your moral obligation. I think it was on the Gary Vaynerchuk thing, actually. But unless you feel like it's your moral obligation to help people at those times of day, then find another job. It's that important.
Yeah, I tell people that all the time, and they're like, "What's your number one recommendation for shift workers?" I'm like, "Quit doing shift work." That's my number one. But unfortunately, we can't convince the criminals to take the night off, and
it's a shame
so everyone can get sleep, and we can't it's a lot easier to fight a war at night and sneak up on targets at night, and then people get in car accidents and bad things happen at night, and doctors need to treat patients in the night, and nurses and all that stuff, and so it's an unfortunate aspect of life. But I've dealt with some hospitals and on shift work, and like helped them with their emergency room, like kind of idealize their shift work, because what a lot of organizations do, especially law enforcement, is people get on night shift and they do it for their whole career. So like I've met countless numbers of law enforcement law enforcement guys who say I've been doing the midnight shift for 20 plus years, and I'm just like, wow. like
how are you still here?
Yeah, like I hope you have a lot of life insurance, and you had kids young. Like I don't know what else to tell you, but I mean you've done some irreparable damage there. I mean, if you quit, I think it's probably like quitting smoking. If you'd smoked for 20 years and you quit, it's still a good idea to quit. Probably still gain some longevity and disease risk mitigation, but you still smoked for 20 years and you still caused some damage, and there's still a good chance it's going to impact your life. And the other part about shift work is that it emotionally wrecks people. I mean, it just destroys normal
it's
cognition.
To have a life as well.
Yeah. And I mean, they're way more prone to be depressed and moody and have, anger issues and, take things personally and have anxiety and all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's just not a joyful way to go through life. And, I know it. I trained, in a hospital where we did, every other night we were on call, and we essentially worked for 36 hours straight, and, went home and got like one night of normal sleep and had to come back to work the next day. And, it was just, horrible. I mean, I can't believe that people do that by choice for a long time. They do.
Yeah. By the way, all these, what I'll do is I'll link up your jet lag article, and I'll put it at alphamovement.co/docparsley, along with all the show notes. So anyone who's listening can just link in there and they'll find your article. To take a complete left turn, who's the first person you think of when you hear the word successful? Big question.
That's a pretty interesting question.
Have some time to think about it if you want, and we can go on to something else.
Yeah, I think that I mean it's.
So I think the dichotomy
it's interesting that that's such a hard question for me to answer. I mean, I know a lot of super high performance people, but unfortunately, because of my job, I know both. I know the sort of dark side of their life as well, like the part that's not going the way they want it to be. So even though, they may have this amazing celebrity status and everybody thinks that their life is, just like super on top, they probably, they very often have, much bigger problems than sort of the average American does, even though they have this amazing public persona or celebrity status or whatever. I think I guess if I didn't have having less than a few days to think about that, I would say probably not ironically, but probably subclimactically. I think probably Rob Wolf is probably the.
Okay, why is that? I think I know why you think that, but why is that?
I think that because Rob has just done an excellent job of living, doing his own research and his own thinking and developing his own values. I mean, he's not an ego-driven guy whatsoever. He's not really even an accomplishment-driven guy. He's a completely value-driven guy, and he has managed to carve out a very successful lifestyle that allows him to do pretty much whatever he wants to do. He gets to work on whatever projects he wants to work on with people that he wants to do it with. He has obviously he values nutrition and sustainability, and he gets to talk a lot about that, and he gets to have a lot of influence on that, and he practices what he preaches, and he eats well, and he works out regularly, and he gets good sleep, and he's a very low stress guy, and he's very authentic, and he's very fun to be around. He has a ton of community, a ton of people that that support him and that he gets to work with. And yeah, I mean, I'd have a really hard time pulling out any problems on the Rob Wolf front, and he and I are really close. I know his life very well. The only advice I would have had to Rob would be to have his kids a little younger, because Rob's nearly my age, and he has like I think 5-year-old and probably 2-year-old.
Or must be hard work.
Yeah, so that's a little rough.
Yeah.
Like I did that in my 20s, and he's done that in his 40s, and I can tell you it was hard in my 20s. So I can only imagine how hard that would be now. My kids are all teenagers now, so they hardly need me at all.
And what's a book that you've gifted a lot? And also, I'm going to add to that just to confuse you and do 2 questions in one. What's the best resource on sleep there is at the moment as well?
Oh man, it depends. So that really depends on where you're. I guess where you're at with what you're looking for in sleep information. So I can tell you that when I work with anyone to help them improve sleep, the number one problem across the board, I don't care who they are, is getting them to realize how deleterious poor sleep or inefficient or suboptimal sleep, let's just say suboptimal sleep. So really getting them to value sleep. Once you get somebody to value sleep, people are smart, and there's information is everywhere, and it's easily accessible, and they can figure out how to do anything. They can figure out how to deal with jet lag. They can figure out how to do a bedtime routine. They can figure out all the sleep hygiene stuff. That's not a big deal. People are smart enough to figure all that out on their own. But getting people to really value sleep is the biggest problem. So I honestly don't think there's any one resource, because it kind of depends on what people are looking to improve in their lives, whether they're looking to improve their fitness or their cognitive performance, athletic performance, parenting skills, emotionality, moods, whatever. But Lights Out is probably a really good place to start. It's an older book. It's probably 10 years old or something. Lights Out. It's got Lights Out, Sleep, Sugar, and Survival. So it kind of ties nutrition and sleep together, I think it's a pretty comprehensive book. I have not read Ariana Huffington's book on sleep yet that she just released.
That's who recommended the idea of not doing shift work.
What's that?
I mentioned earlier about
Yeah.
someone who said don't do shift work unless it's just your moral obligation. That was it was Ariana Huff.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I've actually downloaded that on Audible, and I usually listen to books like those kind of books when I walk. Yeah, I haven't read that book yet. Might be a great resource. But to answer your other question, the book that I actually end up gifting the most is called Take a Nap. Take a Nap, Change Your Life Forever. It's written by a woman named Sarah Mednick, and she's a PhD researcher at UC San Diego, and she talks enough about sleep physiology in there for people to get a good idea of a lot of the things you and I have just talked about, and things we talked about in the previous podcast. But she also gives people a very a definitive way of calculating when they should be taking naps and how long their naps should be. Okay. And most people, like I said, can't live the ideal lifestyle, so most people would benefit greatly from naps. And so that's the book I give away the most, and it's a really short read. I mean, it's like 60 pages long or something, but it's a really, really good book.
Yeah, nice. And I know we're coming up really short on time. Have you got time for one more question?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Are there any daily routines that you follow and that particularly set you up for success, or that you feel help you get stuff done? Or for health in general as well?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I adhere to a ketogenic diet because it really helps me maintain a nice level cognitive functioning. So I don't really sort of have productivity ups and downs. And that's, that's kind of its own story, but it's just, sort of a different way of fueling your brain. So, for me, that's a tenet. Of course, I have a very definitive, sleep routine that I do every single night. And like I told you, I sleep very consistently. And I think that's a big thing. I meditate 30 minutes every day, and I take a 30-minute nap every day. And then some days I may meditate more, or I might use a heart rate variability kind of training tool, or neurofeedback or biofeedback kind of training tool or something like that. And then, I have to get out and do some sort of physical activity every day, even if it's just like, going on a 3 or 4 mile walk. I have to do that. And the other sort of key to sort of two keys to productivity. One is I prioritize my week before my week starts, and I say these are the things that absolutely have to happen. And usually I try to get it down to just one. Like if I could only get one thing done this week, this is the one thing I'm going to do. And usually that's not an action. That's a project, which is made up of many actions. And so, I do my sort of morning wake up routine. And then, I do the hardest action on that list, to make sure that at least that one thing gets done. And that's sort of my productivity schedule there.
You've just opened up a whole can of worms there.
Yes, I know.
There's so many things I'd like to talk about, but I'm well aware that we're coming up on time. So where can people find out a bit more about you? Obviously, I'll link to anything back in those show notes at alphamovement.co/.parsley as well. Where can we find out a bit more about you? Social media, your website, anything like that?
Yeah. All my social media links are on my website, docparsley.com. It's just DOC Parsley, PARSLEY, docparsley.com. There's blogs on there. I think most of my videos and lectures that have been recorded, in my TED Talk and all that kind of stuff is on there. Lots of podcasts are on there. Lots of information about me. I'm fairly active on Twitter, not really I mean, I have Facebook, I have Instagram. I don't do a whole lot with that, but I do interact with people on Twitter pretty regularly. People ask me short little questions and I give them short little answers, and sometimes they ask me really long questions and I tell them, I'm sorry, I can't answer that in 140 characters.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you so much for jumping on the show. I really appreciate it. I know it's going to go down a storm with everyone, so thank you.
All right, thank you for having me on.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Alpha Movement podcast. You can find out more about the Alpha Movement at alphamovement.co or facebook.com/alphamovementofficial. In particular, if you want to find out more about the Academy, head to alphamovement.co/academy and you'll find out everything you need to know. You can watch a short little video and find out everything you need to know about joining the ultimate tribe of men trying to better themselves and become the ultimate version of themselves. Please, if you enjoyed the show, do me a massive favour and head over to iTunes, leave me a 5-star review, or check out any other of our means and share us. Reach out to me if you enjoyed it. Reach out to Dr. Parsley if you enjoyed it. And yeah, I'll see you again soon for another episode of the Alpha Movement podcast.